Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show Crosstalk. Well, Peter, the US government is now ferociously engaged in a particular diplomatic activities. It's leaning heavily on the countries of Central Asia in order to move their hardware from Afghanistan into those countries and to set up air bases and military bases in those countries. So we've had the trips to Central Asia, we've had dignitaries from Central Asia coming to the United States. And this is clearly something that the United States is absolutely hell-bent on. They're withdrawing from Afghanistan, but they want to maintain bases in the neighborhood to conduct intelligence operations and to store all the hardware and to house the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Afghans who will want to flee from a possible Taliban-led Afghanistan. Over the weekend, there was a story in the Russian paper Kommersant, which said that during the meeting in Geneva in June, Putin had offered the use of Russian bases for the United States after their withdrawal from Afghanistan. This has not been confirmed or denied by the Kremlin. But what I think is really interesting here is that clearly this is United States wants to spread out into Central Asia. We know that Pakistan has already said absolutely not. You're not doing anything from Pakistani soil. I'm assuming that the Central Asian countries will also say no, because the alternative is because wherever there's a US base, terrorism flourishes. And so, and particularly,
surprise!
Yeah, surprise. So, suddenly, whoa, there's an ISIS problem in Uzbekistan. Whoa, Al Qaeda is suddenly thriving in Kyrgyzstan or in Tajikistan. I mean, this is always what happens following the United States. And then, if you are going to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Afghani refugees, watch for unleashing this mass migration onto the rest of Central Asia or onto Russia itself. That way, disaster ensues. So, yeah. Peter, what's your take?
I agree with you. I mean, I don't think there's no upside for the Central Asian countries to take on that burden for the United States. Also, it's NATO creep, okay? I mean that, and once you're there in the house, then you get comfortable and you move in the living room, and then you take over the kitchen, and then it's your house, okay? And these countries are poor. There's always that a possibility of elite capture, but these elites, they're painfully aware, acutely aware of their geography, and up north is Russia, out east is China. Exactly. And I very rarely say this, but the only foreign policy triumph I think Boris Yeltsin had was he reached out to the Chinese and said, hey, Central Asia, we can work together. We don't have to be competitors. Right. Let's cooperate together. And they are cooperating together. Right. Also, for the Central Asian countries, the remittances they get from migrant labor, and I see them every single day, okay? So up to 20% of their economy is based on remittances from workers in Russia. Right. And I have a few close friends that are migrant workers. And so they're not gonna wanna mess with that. That's too important. Almost all of these countries have a substantial debt relationship with China. China is obviously going to frown upon this. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. As the U.S. is trying to recruit a new coalition of the willing, the Chinese and the Russians and others are going to say, look, we have to rethink this whole thing. It's our neighborhood. These guys, they were there for 20 years. They didn't get, they got nothing for it. As a matter of fact, they're leaving. They're leaving with the Taliban in charge. Okay, so what Russia has done, I can't say, and I'm sure it has, but I can't say with certainty. Russia has been talking with the Taliban because they know the inevitability of the corrupt government in Kabul of falling.
Well, I think to be fair, the Russians are talking to both sides. I mean, and they
yes, of course they are. And Russia deems
that they want a coalition government. They don't, it's not that they're saying.
But Russia, absolutely, Russia deems the Taliban as a terrorist organization. Okay, this isn't kumbaya stuff. Okay, it's raw, cold geopolitics. It's Russia's neighborhood too, and you have to talk with who has power. Okay, as simple as that.
Right, but I don't think that they've just simply said, oh, the Taliban are just coming and there's nothing they can do to stop it. Again,
well, they're hedging their bets. They're hedging their bets,
but I think their view is that there has to be some form of a joint government.
That would be the best.
They do know that the Taliban is a very narrowly based organization. It's based on the Pashtuns, and therefore, all these Uzbeks, Tajiks, and so on. There's no room for them, or the Taliban, and they're very fundamentalist. Islam is not everyone's cup of tea, even in Afghanistan. So I don't think they say, oh, these are people. So I think their goal is, to bring the two parties together. I mean, Ghani was recently in Moscow. So.
Well, I think if anything, George, I mean, to what degree they can help facilitate that remains an open question. Yeah. One thing is not a question. They don't want it spilling over into Central Asia. That's the whole point of this, okay?
Right. They don't want that. But they definitely do not want the return of the Taliban rule. Remember, the Taliban rule from 96 to 2001 was a real problem for the Russians. I mean, there was a reason why Putin immediately told George W. Bush, right, we're on board with this global war on terror. I mean, they don't want a return to.
Also, for everybody to know is that even before the events of 9/11. I mean, the Kremlin was contemplating, is there something we can do militarily? Because they saw the threat there, okay? And it's all remember history. The first person to call George W. Bush was Vladimir Putin after the events. And the facilitation through Russia, that Russia helped the United States in the initial part of taking down the Taliban right after, late in 2001. And, people forget that, okay?
No, I think
reasons, I think, if you take a look over the last 20 years, then the Russians say, look, we really helped you out there, and now you're doing this, okay?
I think that's a very good point, which is why it may well be true that at Geneva, Putin had offered something like, we will allow you to use Russian bases. In other words, we can work together for whether intelligence gathering or counterterrorism or whatever. That's, I think, different from the United States just simply leasing bases and running bases in all these countries where no one has any control as to what the United States is doing.
No, these Central Asian countries do not want to be a target, full stop. Right. They have so many other things to have to deal with, okay? And again, to reemphasize your point, we don't know what's going to happen over the next few months with the government in Kabul, okay? And so nobody, particularly the Russians, don't want to see anyone jumping the gun here and preparing for something that may not be there. I mean, obviously, the entire region is intensely watching what's going on. It's their neighborhood, after all, and including the Chinese are doing it. So I think that they're going to say, it's better to deal with the assets close to home. We have close relationships. We have a treaty organization. These are vehicles that they can work on. I think it's going to be just such a hard sell. Okay.
I think it is.
It would have been different if the frosty relationship that Washington consistently has against Russia. I mean, it could have been maybe something different. I think it's still
allowing military bases. You see, the point is that the Russians have seen what happens in a U.S. military base. I mean, a U.S. military base in Syria doesn't actually do any fighting. I mean, it's actually being used to train ISIS. I mean, they say, well, here, there's a US military base here, and suddenly ISIS fighters out of nowhere have reemerged. The same thing happened, in Kosovo. The moment you have a US military base there, suddenly, whoa, terrorists. I mean, are springing up. So there's people know from history that a U.S. military base is actually not going to be doing any serious fighting, but it's actually going to be using either for spying or subverting the countries that they're based in, or subverting those neighbors. So, I mean, U.S. military bases are bad news, seriously bad news.
And don't you think, George, I mean, with the NSA, I mean, it's really interesting. If you look what happened in August 2008, when Saakashvili sent his forces into South Ossetia, and people have always said, there was the Russian response was disproportionate. Well, one of the things as they were going down to Gori is they took out all of the NSA's infrastructure. I mean, I've been told up to $1 billion worth. Okay, and I think that we can be rest assured that if there are American military bases in Central Asia, they're going to have eyes and ears, and they're going to be looking not just at Afghanistan, if you get my drift.
Exactly. No, that's an excellent point. Exactly. And I think that the Russians and the Chinese are very well aware that, you're actually bringing them in. They're going to be using it to spy and to subvert. I mean, they're moving into Kazakhstan, which is sort of right next to China. I mean, the Chinese are going to say, oh, that's fine. We trust you, having accused us of genocide and having embraced the cause of the Uyghurs. We're going to trust you, have a military base here. No, of course not.
And do you think Kazakhstan wants to get in the middle of that? No way. No way.
Kazakhstan is that's a real long shot. I mean, particularly Kazakhstan actually has very good relations with Russia. So they don't. There's a lot of Russians who live there. So no way that's going to happen. But even more intriguing is this tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands of Afghans who are going to flee, because Russia, as you know, they have visa-free travel with these countries. That's going to be a serious problem. As we know about people suddenly losing all their ID papers. Sorry, I'm a refugee. I fled the Taliban.
That's a nightmare for the Russians, and it's a nightmare for Central Asia, because these countries are small, they're sparsely populated, and if you have a wave of migrants coming over the border, it completely destabilizes these countries, and it destabilizes the entire region. And so not only, it's not contained in Afghanistan, it goes north and it goes east, and everyone loses in that scenario. And that's why, as much as they might want to, wine and dine a leader and show that, we can there are perks for you and all of this. At the end of the day, it's too destabilizing, and there's the law of unintended consequences as well. Okay, and since you pointed it out, these ethnic groups do not get along very well. Okay, so I mean, even in Kyrgyzstan, I mean, they're the north and south are very much at odds with each other, and my friends from Kyrgyzstan say that that we don't want any more these outsiders because it destabilizes it. Okay, and then there's always the regime change crowd that says, here is an opportunity for us. Okay, no, they've seen the playbook. Stay away from it.
Again, regime change, U.S. military bases. They fit, like a hand in a glove.
NATO expansion.
Exactly. So this is a sort of, but it is interesting of this flurry of diplomatic activity, and there all this talk of, we're going to build you infrastructure, and this is a big thing, infrastructure. No infrastructure in the U.S., but infrastructure in Central Asia. So
the Chinese will do it.
Yeah,
the Chinese will do it.
Yeah, exactly. So I tend to think that that this heavy-handed attempt to buy these leaders will fail. I mean, they must be smart enough to know that this is an absolute disaster.
You have to wonder, George. As they tripped up Trump and trying to get out of Afghanistan. You'd think that some people would have thought, hey, we ought to think ahead, but no, they didn't, because they thought they would always win. All right. And so this is a day late and a buck short. And if this is the kind of strategic thinking coming out of Washington, I can tell you people in Central Asia say, we don't want your strategic thinking. Okay, we'll think about the neighborhood ourselves.
Right. Okay. All right, Peter. Where can
righty.
be found?
We're on Locals, everyone. So go into, type in thegaggle.locals.com. George and I are doing a series of interviews on Skype with gagglers. It's really a lot of fun. We get to ask you questions too. The Gaggle store was launched last week. It's doing well. I'm very impressed. We have new products coming out. My little buddy is highly profiled. I'm not going to bother him this time. We have a Q&A coming up, right?
We've got yeah, exactly. We're planning the first of our Q&A sessions, so that's going to be very exciting. And I think we will soon be starting a live streaming. That's going to be very, very exciting. So that I think we'll
we were made for it.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. Give you heads up as to when it'll take place and how you can join and so on. So that's also going to be very exciting. And remember, we don't have billionaires underwriting us. Rupert.
We have a tip jar.
We have a tip jar, exactly. But Rupert Murdoch is not banging on my door saying, "Hey, how much money would you like today?" So we rely on subscriptions and your contributions, and we're very grateful for them. The more you can help, the better the product. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.